My parents ditched my son's ICU bedside for my brother's birthday bash, but when they came crawling back, I taught them a lesson that'll haunt them forever. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and desperation, a sterile cocktail that clung to the back of my throat. I sat in a hard plastic chair, its edges digging into my thighs, staring at my 6-year-old son, Ethan, lying motionless in the ICU bed. Tubes snaked from his tiny arms, and a ventilator hissed rhythmically, pumping air into his lungs. Outside, the Denver skyline glittered under a bruised evening sky, the city's high-rises reflecting the last streaks of a Rocky Mountain sunset. I barely noticed. My world had shrunk to this room, to the steady beep of monitors and the faint hope that my boy would open his eyes again. I'm Jack Harper, 38, a guy who clawed his way up from nothing to run a construction company that revamps boutique hotels and high-end restaurants across Colorado. 11 years ago, I started with a beat-up toolbox and a dream, hammering nails in the blistering sun of Denver's suburbs. Now, my crew of 40 turns crumbling storefronts into Instagram-worthy hotspots. But none of that mattered today. Not when Ethan, my only kid, was fighting for his life, his small body ravaged by bacterial meningitis, and not when my parents, Henry and Clara Harper, had just shown me exactly how little I meant to them. It wasn't always like this. Growing up in Aurora, a stone's throw from Denver, I was the kid who made things happen. Straight A's, captain of the high school basketball team, and a part-time gig fixing cars at Rusty's auto shop by 16. Our neighborhood was all split-level ranch houses and cul-de-sacs, the kind of place where kids rode bikes until the streetlights flickered on and neighbors waved from their front porches. My dad, Henry, was a bridge engineer, always on some job site, his pickup truck caked in red Colorado dirt. Mom, Clara, worked at the local library, surrounded by stacks of books and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. They were solid, middle-class folks, the kind you'd expect to cheer at your games or slip you a 20 for good grades. But they had a blind spot, and his name was Tommy. My younger brother, 5 years my junior, was their golden boy. Tommy could barely tie his shoes without a parade, while I'd bring home a report card with 1 B and Mom would sigh, "Jack, what happened here?" Tommy's C's and D's? They'd take him to Dairy Queen for trying his best. It stung, sure, but I learned early to keep my head down and work harder. By 18, I was out the door, paying my own way through community college in Boulder, where the air smelled of pine and ambition. I'd work construction all day, hauling lumber under a sky so blue it hurt your eyes, then drive to night classes, my jeans dusted with sawdust. Eventually, I transferred to the University of Colorado, got my business degree, and, by 27, I'd saved enough to start Harper Builds. Small jobs at first, kitchen remodels, deck additions, but word spread, and soon I was gutting old diners and turning them into brew pubs with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Life was good for a while. I met Emily at a job site, a trendy coffee shop in Lodo with floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of fresh espresso. She was an interior designer, all sharp wit and warm laughter, her hazel eyes lighting up when she talked about color palettes or reclaimed wood. We got married when I was 30, bought a house in a quiet Denver suburb where the streets were lined with cottonwood trees that whispered in the evening breeze. Ethan came along a year later, a bundle of energy with his mom's smile and my stubborn streak. I'd come home from job sites, my boots crusted with mud, to find him building Lego spaceships in our living room, the hardwood floors glowing under the soft light of thrift store lamps. Then, 4 years ago, The world broke. Emily was driving home from a client meeting on 25 when a drunk driver in a jacked-up F-150 blew through a red light. She was gone before the paramedics arrived. 1 minute, I'm a husband and father, planning a weekend hike in Estes Park. The next, I'm picking out a casket in a funeral home that smelled of lilies and regret. Ethan, only 3, didn't understand. He'd sit on his rocket ship bedsheets, clutching a stuffed dinosaur, asking when Mommy was coming back. I'd hold it together until he fell asleep, then collapse on the couch, staring at the ceiling of our too-quiet house. My parents showed up for the funeral, held in a small church with stained glass windows casting rainbows across the pews. Dad, in his stiff suit, gave me a single shoulder pat and muttered, "She was a good one." Mom hugged me like I was a stranger, then spent the service fussing over Tommy, who was apparently devastated by his sister-in-law's death. They stayed for the reception at our house, where neighbors had filled the kitchen island with casseroles and sympathy cards. Then they left, saying Tommy needed help moving into a new condo, one Dad co-signed for because Tommy's credit was trashed from blowing thousands on crypto scams. They didn't call to check on Ethan or me, not once. No offers to watch him so I could catch a breath or grieve without a toddler tugging at my sleeve. Emily's mom, Margaret, was different. She flew in from Seattle the day after the accident. Her gray hair pulled back in a bun. Her hands knotted with arthritis, but still strong enough to hold us together. She stayed for 3 months in our guest room, where the windows overlooked a backyard dotted with wildflowers. Every morning, she'd make Ethan pancakes, her slow movements deliberate as she flipped them on the griddle. She'd drive him to preschool in her rental car, the Denver sun glinting off the hood, then come back to wash dishes or freeze meals for us. At night, when the house felt like a tomb, she'd sit with me on the porch, the air cool and scented with sagebrush, saying nothing but somehow saying everything. When she had to return to Seattle to care for her sister, she hugged me so tight I thought she'd never let go. "Call me every day, Jack," she said, tears streaking her face. And I did. I rebuilt our life, brick by brick. Hired a part-time nanny, a college kid named Sarah who'd pick Ethan up from school and play superheroes with him until I got home. I rearranged my work schedule to be there by 6, trading dusty job sites for story time in Ethan's room, where glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the ceiling. I learned to cook, real meals, not just microwaved junk. Chicken stir-fry, roasted veggies, even a halfway decent lasagna. Ethan and I found a new rhythm, our evenings filled with laughter and the clatter of dishes in our cozy kitchen. My parents? They were ghosts. They'd see Ethan maybe twice a year, always on their terms, usually at a riverside bistro where the patio lights twinkled against the South Platte River. They'd spend the meal scrolling their phones or hyping Tommy's latest business venture, some get-rich-quick scheme that always needed just a little seed money. I kept reaching out, not for me but for Ethan. I wanted him to have grandparents, to know some kind of family beyond the two of us, but every visit left me wondering why I bothered. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a crisp May day, the kind where the Denver air feels clean enough to drink, and the aspen trees outside our kitchen window shimmered in the breeze. Ethan, 6 now, was perched at the counter, spooning Cheerios into his mouth and rambling about velociraptors. "Dad, did you know their claws were like super sharp?" he said, his eyes wide with that kid wonder that makes your heart ache. I was sipping coffee, mentally prepping for a make-or-break meeting with a British investor, William Hayes, who was flying in to sign a $2 million deal to renovate a chain of boutique hotels. It was the kind of contract that could take Harper Builds to the next level, More hires, bigger projects, a college fund for Ethan that'd keep him safe no matter what. Then it happened. Ethan's spoon clattered against the bowl. His eyes rolled back, and before I could reach him, he slid off the stool, hitting the hardwood floor with a thud that echoed in my skull. His body stiffened, then convulsed, arms jerking like a broken marionette. Blood poured from his nose. God, so much blood. And I saw the gash where he'd bitten through his tongue. My heart stopped, but my body moved. I'd taken a first aid course after Emily died, a desperate attempt to feel less powerless in a world that could snatch everything away. I rolled him onto his side, made sure his airway was clear, and timed the seizure. 2 minutes. 3. It wasn't stopping. I scooped him up, his small frame limp in my arms, and ran to the truck, gravel crunching under my boots in our driveway. I laid him across the back seat, still seizing, and tore through Denver's morning traffic, blowing through red lights as horns blared. The hospital was 15 minutes away. I made it in 7. The ER was a blur of white coats and shouted orders. I carried Ethan through the sliding doors, his body jerking against my chest, and yelled for help. Nurses swarmed, a doctor barking questions. How long has he been seizing? 9 minutes, I said, my voice shaking as I checked my watch. They whisked him onto a gurney, his face pale and streaked with blood and foam. A nurse pointed me to registration, where I stood, Ethan's blood staining my flannel shirt, filling out forms with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. 4 hours later, Dr. Amelia Carter, a no-nonsense woman with graying hair and steady eyes, found me in the waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the Denver skyline loomed through the window, now cloaked in twilight. "Mr. Harper, your son has bacterial meningitis," she said. "It's serious. The bacteria have inflamed the membranes around his brain and spinal cord. The seizure was caused by that inflammation. We've started him on antibiotics, but the next 48 hours are critical." They were moving him to the ICU, monitoring for brain swelling. If it got worse, they might need to drill into his skull to relieve the pressure. I followed as they wheeled him upstairs, the hospital corridors cold and echoing, the city lights winking outside like distant stars. Ethan was unconscious, hooked to machines that beeped and hummed, a ventilator breathing for him. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand, its warmth the only thing keeping me anchored. I made calls to clear my schedule, my project manager stepping up to handle job sites. Most clients were understanding, but the Hayes meeting couldn't be rescheduled. William Hayes and his team were only in town for one night, and this deal was the biggest of my career. If I missed it, they'd go with another contractor, and I'd lose the chance to secure Ethan's future. I called my parents, who lived in a tidy Aurora neighborhood of brick bungalows and manicured lawns just 20 minutes away. "Mom, it's Jack," I said, my voice raw. "Ethan's in the ICU with meningitis. It's bad. I need you and Dad to sit with him for 4 hours tonight so I can close this deal. It's critical." Mom didn't hesitate. "Of course, Jack. We'll be there. Focus on your meeting." Relief washed over me. For all their flaws, they were Ethan's grandparents. They'd step up when it mattered. By 5 p.m., they arrived at the hospital. Dad, in his usual Carhartt jacket, gave me a curt nod. Mom, her purse clutched tight, patted Ethan's hand and smoothed his hair. "We've got this, Jack," she said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Go do what you need to." I walked them through everything. The doctor's names, the nurse's instructions, the signs of rising brain pressure to watch for. I gave them my client's address and said I'd be back by 10. Call me if anything changes, I told them. I mean it. Mom nodded, her face soft. Go, Jack. This is important for you and Ethan. We'll call if anything happens. I kissed Ethan's forehead, his skin cool under my lips, and left, my chest tight with guilt, but trusting they'd stay. The meeting was at a downtown hotel, its lobby all marble floors and chandeliers that threw light like scattered diamonds. William Hayes, a sharp-eyed Brit in a tailored suit, greeted me with a handshake. I apologized for my appearance. Jeans and a clean shirt I'd grabbed from my truck, the blood-stained flannel long gone. Family emergency, I explained briefly. Hayes nodded, his face kind but professional. Let's get to it then. We dove into plans. Blueprints spread across a mahogany table, timelines debated, costs haggled. By 8:30, we were close to signing, the deal all but sealed. I checked my phone, on silent for the meeting, and saw no missed calls. Ethan must be stable, I thought, exhaling. Hayes caught my glance. Everything all right, Jack? I hesitated, not wanting to derail the moment. My son's in the ICU, my parents are with him. His face softened. Family first, mate. My grandson was sick once, missed a deal to stay with him. Never regretted it. We can wrap this tomorrow if you need. His words hit like a punch, but I shook my head. Let's finish this. I'll get back to him soon. We signed by 9, hands shaken, deal done. I drove back to the hospital, the city's lights blurring past like fireflies. But when I stepped off the ICU elevator, my stomach dropped. Nurses and doctors swarmed Ethan's room, their voices clipped and urgent. No sign of my parents. Dr. Carter looked up, her eyes flashing with something close to fury. Mr. Harper, where have you been? We've been calling for 3 hours. My heart stopped. What happened? She explained, her voice tight. Ethan's intracranial pressure had spiked 2 hours ago. They'd had to perform an emergency ventriculostomy, drilling a hole in his skull to drain fluid and save his brain. No one was there to consent, so they'd acted under emergency protocol. If we'd waited any longer, she said, he could have had permanent brain damage, or worse. I stood there, Ethan's blood still faintly staining my hands from that morning, my mind reeling. My parents were here. I left them at 5:30. The charge nurse, a guy named Mike, stepped forward, his face grim. They left around 6:15, sir. We called every number in Ethan's file. When we couldn't reach anyone, we had to act. I checked my phone. 20 missed calls from the hospital. I'd silenced it for the meeting and forgotten. I called Mom. No answer. Dad. Nothing. Voicemail after voicemail, my voice cracking. Where are you? Ethan needed you. I sat by his bed, staring at the bandage on his head, the drain snaking out, the ventilator's steady hiss. Dr. Carter assured me they'd caught the spike in time, but it was close. Too close. At midnight, still no word from my parents. I opened Instagram to update friends about Ethan. The first post stopped me cold. Tommy, grinning at a steakhouse downtown, a neon 33 balloon floating behind him. Caption: Epic birthday bash. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for the surprise. Posted at 7:30 p.m. There they were, Henry and Clara, raising glasses, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world, while my son lay here, his brain swelling, a drill piercing his skull. They'd left him, to throw Tommy a party. I stared at that photo, the steakhouse's neon lights reflecting off the river outside, and something inside me snapped. Not rage, not yet. It was colder, sharper, like a blade honed over years of being second best. I screenshotted the post, noting the timestamp, and closed the app. Ethan was all that mattered now. The nurses checked his vitals hourly, their shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Dr. Carter said the antibiotics were working, the pressure dropping, but he wasn't out of the woods. I didn't sleep. I held his hand, its small warmth my only tether to hope. At 6 a.m., my parents strolled into the ICU like they'd just grabbed coffee. Dad, his jacket slung over one shoulder, said, "How's he doing?" We stepped out for a bit. I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the sterile room. "A bit? 12 hours?" Mom's eyes narrowed. "What's that tone, Jack?" I turned my phone toward them, Tommy's post glaring on the screen. "This." They froze. Dad recovered first, his voice dismissive. "It was just a couple hours. Tommy's been planning his birthday for months." I stepped closer, my voice low, dangerous. "They drilled a hole in Ethan's skull last night. He could have died. I trusted you." Mom straightened, her purse clutched like a shield. "You're blowing this out of proportion. This is a hospital, Jack. Doctors were here. But Tommy's 33rd? That's once in a lifetime." Her words were a gut punch. In that moment, I saw it all clearly. Ethan and I were afterthoughts. Always had been. Tommy's birthday trumped my son's life. "Get out," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mom scoffed. "You're being dramatic. We helped, and this is how you repay us? Tommy appreciates us at least." "Get out." Louder now, enough to draw a security guard to the doorway. "Problem here?" he asked. Dad grabbed Mom's arm. "Let's go, Clara. He's always been like this, making a big deal out of nothing." As they left, Mom turned back. "Don't call us again, Jack. Ever." I looked at her, calm as stone. "Don't worry, I won't." I sat back down, Ethan's hand in mine, the Denver skyline fading into dawn outside. Something had shifted, like a fault line cracking open. I wasn't their son anymore, not in any way that mattered. And for the first time, that felt like freedom. Dr. Carter came by later, checking Ethan's chart. "He's stabilizing," she said, her voice softer now. "The procedure worked, but we need to watch him for another 48 hours. Then she sat down, her clipboard resting on her lap. "Jack, as Ethan's doctor, I need to be straight with you. What your parents did was medical neglect. They left a critically ill child alone without telling anyone. If we hadn't caught the pressure spike when we did..." She didn't finish, but her eyes said enough. "I've documented everything. If you want to pursue this legally, you've got a case." I stared at her, the weight of it sinking in. Sue my own parents? The idea was insane, but so was what they'd done. I called Margaret. She answered on the first ring, her voice warm despite the hour. "How's my boy?" I told her everything. Ethan's condition, my parents' betrayal. "I'm on the next flight," she said, no hesitation. My business partner, Nate, called next. I'd texted him before the Hayes meeting. "The deal's signed," I told him. "But Ethan's worse than we thought." Nate didn't miss a beat. "Focus on your kid, Jack. We've got this." "Hayes called me this morning. Says you're the real deal. They're all in." Relief flickered, but it was faint against the fear for Ethan. That afternoon, a nurse handed me a business card. "Jason Klein, Hospital Legal Counsel. He wants to talk." Klein was a sharp guy, mid-40s, who laid it out plain. The hospital had to report child endangerment. My parents' stunt qualified. "You've got options, Jack," he said. "Negligence, endangerment, emotional distress. Talk to a lawyer, but don't wait too long." I nodded, my mind already turning. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't letting it slide. As the sun set over the Rockies, painting the ICU windows in hues of orange and purple. I made a choice. Ethan deserved better than grandparents who ditch him for a steak dinner. I'd show them what happens when you put the wrong kid first. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The Denver dawn broke over the ICU, painting the room in soft pinks and golds. But it did nothing to warm the chill in my bones. Ethan lay still, his small chest rising and falling with the ventilator's rhythm. A bandage wrapped around his head where they'd drilled to save his life. I hadn't slept, hadn't moved from the chair beside his bed, my hand clutching his like it could anchor him to this world. The hospital was quiet now, the flurry of last night's emergency replaced by the steady hum of machines and the occasional murmur of nurses outside. Outside the window, the Rocky Mountains stood silent, their peaks sharp against the morning sky, indifferent to the chaos below. I'm Jack Harper, 38, a man who'd built a life from sweat and grit, running a construction company that turned forgotten buildings into Denver's trendiest spots. But last night, everything I'd built, every sacrifice, every late night, felt meaningless. My parents, Henry and Clara, had walked out on my son, Ethan, while he fought for his life in this sterile room. They'd chosen my brother Tommy's 33rd birthday party, complete with neon balloons and steak dinners, over their grandson's survival. That Instagram post, Tommy's smug grin, my parents raising glasses at a riverside grill while Ethan's brain swelled, burned in my mind like a brand. I trusted them, and they'd betrayed us. Worse, they'd nearly cost me everything. Dr. Amelia Carter's words echoed, medical neglect. She'd sat across from me hours ago, her clipboard resting on her lap, her voice low but unyielding. If we hadn't caught the pressure spike when we did, she didn't need to finish. I saw it in her eyes, the razor-thin margin between Ethan waking up and Ethan being gone forever. My parents' absence had forced the hospital to act without consent, drilling into my son's skull to save him. And now, as the first rays of sunlight crept across the linoleum, I felt something new hardening inside me. Not just anger, but resolve. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't letting it slide. The morning dragged on, each beep of Ethan's monitor a reminder of how close I'd come to losing him. I called Margaret, Emily's mom, again, updating her as she boarded a flight from Seattle. "I'll be there by noon," she said, her voice steady despite the crack of worry beneath it. "Don't move from his side, Jack." I wouldn't. I couldn't. But I had to make another call to Nate, my business partner, who was still in Chicago finalizing supplier contracts. "The Hayes deal's done," I told him, my voice hoarse. "But Ethan, it's bad, Nate. They had to operate." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Forget the business, Jack. We've got good people. Focus on your boy. Hayes called me at dawn. Says you're a stand-up guy. The deal's solid." His words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the image of that Instagram post, my parents' smiles mocking me from across town. Around 8 a.m., a nurse slipped me a business card. "Jason Klein, Hospital Legal Counsel. He'd like a word when you're ready." I tucked it into my pocket, my mind already spinning. Legal action? Against my own parents? It felt like a betrayal of some unspoken family code. But what they'd done wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. A choice to prioritize Tommy's birthday over Ethan's life. I glanced at my son, his face pale under the fluorescent lights, and knew I couldn't let it go. Margaret arrived just after noon, her gray coat dusted with Seattle rain, her eyes red but fierce. She hugged me tight in the ICU hallway, the scent of her lavender perfume grounding me for a moment. "How is he?" she whispered, peering through the glass at Ethan. I told her everything. The seizure, the emergency surgery, my parents' disappearance. Her face hardened, a rare flash of anger in her usually gentle demeanor. They left him. For a party? She shook her head, her arthritic hands clenching. Jack, that's unforgivable. She didn't say more, just pulled a chair up beside Ethan's bed and took his other hand. Her presence a quiet promise that we weren't alone. Dr. Carter checked in again, her stethoscope glinting under the hospital lights. He's holding steady, she said, reviewing Ethan's chart. The antibiotics are working and the pressure's down, but we're not clear yet. Another 48 hours minimum. I nodded, my throat tight. And my parents? I asked, almost dreading the answer. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I've noted their absence in the chart. The hospital's required to report this, Jack. It's child endangerment. The word hit like a brick. Endangerment. My parents, the people who raised me, had endangered my son. I thanked her, my voice barely audible, and she left me with Margaret, the weight of her words settling like dust. I met Jason Klein that afternoon in a small hospital office, its window overlooking a courtyard where aspens swayed in the breeze. He was mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. The hospital's filing a report with Child Protective Services, he said, leaning back in his chair. What your parents did, leaving a critically ill minor without notifying staff, is serious. You've got grounds for a civil suit. Negligence, endangerment, emotional distress. Medical bills alone could justify it. Never mind the trauma. He slid a folder across the desk, detailing statutes and precedents. Talk to your own attorney, but don't wait. There's a clock on these things. I left with the folder, my head buzzing. Sue my parents? The idea felt like stepping off a cliff, but the alternative, letting them walk away scot-free, felt worse. Back in Ethan's room, I sat with Margaret, the Denver skyline now glowing under a twilight haze. Ethan's monitors beeped steadily, a fragile rhythm of hope. What are you going to do, Jack? Margaret asked, her voice soft but probing. I stared at Ethan's hand, the IV tape stark against his skin. They need to answer for this, I said finally. Not just for me, for him. She nodded, her eyes fierce. Then do it. For Ethan. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Ethan stayed in the ICU, his condition improving but slow. Margaret never left, sleeping in the chair beside his bed, her knitting needles clicking softly as she made him a scarf, the yarn a bright blue to match his favorite dinosaur. I'd slip out for 2 hours each morning to check on Harper builds, my crew stepping up like family. My project manager, Carlos, handled clients, while Nate coordinated from Chicago. We're good, boss, Carlos said one morning, clapping me on the shoulder outside a job site where cranes loomed against the mountain backdrop. Focus on Ethan. We've got your back. Their loyalty was a lifeline, a reminder that family wasn't just blood. William Hayes surprised me on day 10, showing up at the hospital with a wooden train set for Ethan, its carvings intricate and polished. Business can wait, he said, his British accent clipped but warm. My daughter had leukemia years ago. I missed a deal to stay with her. Best choice I ever made. He handed me his card, his personal number scrawled on the back. Call when you're ready, Jack. The contract's not going anywhere. His kindness, so unexpected from a man I'd met only once, hit harder than I expected. I thanked him, my voice catching, and he left, his polished shoes clicking down the hall. Ethan came home after 2 weeks, frail but alive, his headaches and sensitivity to light a constant worry. Margaret moved into our guest room, her suitcases tucked under the window where cottonwoods framed the view. She cooked dinners, pot roast, cornbread, anything to put weight back on Ethan's bones. Carlos and his wife, Lena, started dropping by on weekends, bringing their kids to play with Ethan in our backyard, where dandelions dotted the grass. Lena taught him card games, her laughter echoing as she pretended to lose. Their support, unasked for but freely given, was a balm to the raw wound my parents had left. 3 months after Ethan's discharge, I met with Sarah Nguyen, a lawyer specializing in negligence cases. Her office overlooked downtown Denver, the glass towers catching the afternoon sun. I brought everything: Ethan's medical records, the hospital's incident report, screenshots of Tommy's Instagram post, my phone logs showing the missed calls. Sarah flipped through the folder, her eyes narrowing. "This is airtight, Jack," she said. "But suing family? It's messy. They'll fight dirty, paint you as the bad guy for leaving Ethan to chase a deal." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "They stopped being family when they walked out on my son. I want them to face it." She nodded, a spark of respect in her eyes. "Then let's do this." We filed the lawsuit the next week. Negligence, child endangerment, emotional distress. We sought damages for Ethan's medical bills, his ongoing care, and the trauma we'd both endured. The first court filing hit my parents like a freight train. Dad called, his voice booming through my phone. "You're suing us? Your own blood? You've always been jealous of Tommy, haven't you?" I let the silence stretch, then said, "Name one thing you've done for me in the last 10 years, Dad." "I'm waiting." He didn't answer. Mom tried tears next, leaving voicemails about tearing the family apart and breaking your father's heart. When that failed, she switched to threats. "Everyone will know what an ungrateful son you are, Jack." I didn't argue. I just said, "See you in court," and hung up. The lawsuit dragged on for 14 months, a slow grind of depositions and motions. My parents hired a hotshot attorney who tried to spin me as the negligent one, abandoning Ethan for a fancy business deal. But the evidence was a brick wall. Hospital records showing their 6:15 p.m. exit, 17 missed calls to my phone, Dr. Carter's testimony about the emergency procedure. The ICU receptionist confirmed they'd left without a word. Even the steakhouse waitress remembered them, gushing about the cute balloon setup for Tommy's party. The final blow was Tommy's deposition. Sarah asked him point blank, "Did you know your parents left Ethan in the ICU to attend your birthday?" He shrugged, his voice casual. "It was my birthday. Big deal." The judge's face, stern behind her glasses, said it all. Throughout it all, Ethan healed. His headaches faded, his energy returned. He went back to school, joined the soccer team, and started tinkering with coding apps on my old laptop. He never asked about Henry or Clara, as if he'd sensed their absence long before I did. Margaret became his rock, cheering at his games despite her aching knees, her Seattle raincoat swapped for a Denver Broncos cap. Carlos and Lena kept showing up, their kids turning our backyard into a playground of laughter and makeshift forts. They were family now, not by blood, but by choice. The trial ended on a gray November day, the Denver air sharp with the promise of snow. The judge's ruling was clear. The defendant's actions showed reckless disregard for a minor in critical condition. This is not a family spat. It's neglect with potentially fatal consequences. She awarded $800,000 for Ethan's medical costs, ongoing care, and emotional damages, plus court fees. My parents weren't rich, but they had equity in their Aurora bungalow and retirement savings. The judgment forced them to sell the house and liquidate most of their accounts. Dad's voice was hollow when he approached me outside the courthouse. "You've ruined us, Jack." I looked at him, feeling nothing but clarity. "No, Dad. You did that when you left Ethan. This is just the receipt." The money went into a trust for Ethan. College, medical needs, a future I'd fight to secure. I didn't want their cash. I wanted accountability. For the first time, they faced consequences for choosing Tommy over us. 4 years passed. Ethan, now 11, was thriving. Straight A's, a striker on his soccer team, and obsessed with building his own video games. Margaret bought a small house 10 minutes away, her front yard bursting with wildflowers she planted with Ethan. She came for dinner 3 nights a week, her laughter filling our kitchen. Carlos and Lena became uncles and aunts in all but name, teaching Ethan to fish in the Platte River and showing up for every school play. The Hayes contract grew into a $6 million annual partnership, William becoming a friend who'd call to check on Ethan as much as on business. Then, one evening, as I grilled burgers in our backyard, the sky streaked with crimson from the setting sun, my phone rang. "Mr. Harper, this is Saint, Luke's medical center. Your mother's had a heart attack. She's asking for you." I froze, the spatula heavy in my hand. Ethan looked up from kicking a soccer ball, his eyes curious. I finished dinner, helped him with his math homework, and tucked him in, his room now filled with posters of coding heroes like Ada Lovelace. Then I drove to the hospital, the same one where Ethan had fought for his life, the city lights blurring past like memories. Mom looked small in her hospital bed, wires and tubes tethering her to machines that beeped like Ethan's had. Dad sat beside her, his face lined with exhaustion, his Carhartt jacket crumpled on a chair. "Jack," he said, standing. "Thank God. We need your help." I stayed silent, my eyes on Mom. "Her bypass surgery," Dad continued. "Insurance won't cover it all, $130,000 out of pocket. We've got nothing left. Tommy can't help." Mom reached out, her hand trembling. "Jack, I'm your mother, please. We have nowhere else to turn." I looked at her, then at Dad, and saw Ethan's bandage, his limp hand, the ventilator's hiss. "When Ethan was in here," I said, my voice low, "you left him for Tommy's birthday. You chose steak and balloons over your grandson's life." Mom's eyes welled up. "I'm sorry, Jack. We were wrong. Don't punish me for one mistake." I leaned closer, my voice a whisper. "It wasn't one mistake. It was a lifetime of choosing Tommy. And now you know what it feels like to be left behind." Dad's face reddened. "You heartless bastard. After all we did for you?" I straightened, calm as the mountains outside. "Name one thing, Dad." "I'm still waiting." I turned to leave, then paused. "I'll send $12,000 tomorrow. Enough for a specialist to set up a payment plan. That's it." Dad sputtered. "That's it? Your mother could die." I looked back, my voice steady. "This is a hospital. She'll be fine. And Ethan's birthday? That's once a year." Mom's face crumpled, her own words thrown back like a slap. I added, "The money's from Ethan. He said to help you, not because you deserve it, but because we're better than you." The next day, Sarah delivered the check with paperwork severing any future financial ties. I signed it with a note. "This closes our account. Permanently." That night, I sat on our porch with Margaret, Carlos, and Lena, watching Ethan play soccer under the glow of string lights. The air smelled of pine and grilled meat, the Rockies a dark silhouette against the stars. "You okay?" Margaret asked, squeezing my hand. I watched Ethan laugh, his face bright as he scored a goal. Yeah, I said. We're gonna be all right. Mom survived her surgery. A colleague, a cardiologist I'd worked with on a hospital remodel, did it at a reduced rate after my contribution. He called to tell me, not my parents. Tommy tried reaching out months later, pitching some sure thing startup. I blocked his number. He showed up at my office once, all fake charm and big promises. Security escorted him out before he could finish. Ethan asked about my parents once, for a school project. I told him they were alive but out of our lives because they couldn't be trusted with his safety. Were they mean to you, Dad? He asked, his eyes serious. Not mean, I said, just not there when it mattered. He nodded, then said, like how Carlos lost his brother but still teaches me soccer. Or how Grandma Margaret's hands hurt, but she never misses my games. Exactly, I said, my heart swelling. Last week, Dad sent a letter. Mom had another heart attack and didn't make it. The funeral was at their old church, its steeple visible from the highway. He said Ethan and I were welcome. I didn't go. I sent flowers with a card. Sorry for your loss, because once, long ago, she was my mom. But regret? I don't have it. Not for the lawsuit, not for walking away, not for building a family from the people who showed up. Margaret, Carlos, Lena, William. Blood doesn't make family. Actions do. And as I watch Ethan run through our backyard, his laughter echoing under a Colorado sky, I know we've built something stronger than blood. Something real.